everyone. Good evening to everyone watching on Zoom and all our participants on FB Live tonight. I am Marian 𝗪𝗁𝗀, your moderator for this 10th session of the Learning Event Series. This Learning Event Series is brought to you by the Dumaguete City Host Lions Club and the Rotary Club of Dumaguete South. The goal of this series of events is for us to gather the most information that we can have and thresh out the issues surrounding the 174-hectare Dumaguete Reclamation Project. So just to emphasize, you've read the house rules, but I'd like to remind everyone here tonight that questions will be entertained at the end of the talk, and I will try my best to accommodate all the questions being asked tonight. You may type your questions in the Q&A box if you are on Zoom or on the FB Live comment section. Let's dive right into tonight's talk on water and the world's heritage. Our speaker tonight is architect Michael F. Manalo, or Miko, who specializes in the conservation of built heritage. He received his training from the Escuela Nacional de Conservacion, 𝗪Restauracion y Museografia in Mexico City, and was chair of the Cultural Committee of the UNESCO National Commission for the Philippines from 2010 to 2016. Currently, he heads the National Committee for Monuments and Sites of the National Commission for the Culture and the Arts, and is a lecturer at the Cultural Heritage Studies Masteral program of the University of Santo Tomas in Manila. Hi, Miko. Good evening.
I hope you're okay. Thank you to the Rotary and Lions Club for this invitation. And wow, I'm back in Dumaguete after a couple of weeks. Yeah. The title of my talk is Water and the World's Heritage. So please bear with me. It's a rather big discussion. I'm not going to try to convince you to do anything. I'm just going to tell you that a lot of people just look at World Heritage as something nice and pretty to look at. Maybe for a lot of people, it's like a bucket list. So everybody wants to see, no, a lot of people would want to see the World Heritage sites of UNESCO, but there is a lot of, there are a lot of things to learn from the World Heritage sites. And right now, I'd really like to show you what we can learn from some of the World Heritage sites that have to do with water. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to emphasize, over 2/3 of the Earth is of the Earth's surface is water. Next slide. So you can imagine that it's not really land that unites all of us. It's actually water, and we need water like we need the air to breathe. And cultures also need water to survive. Next slide, please. So here are some World Heritage sites. For example, this one is 𝗪R𝘁𝗲𝗏 in Indonesia. This is one of the better known World Heritage sites. And a lot of people would go to 𝗪R𝘁𝗏𝗏 to see this, right? You see the monument, but you don't really see the context, right? So next slide, please. The monument is a splendid monument. It is a testament to like the creative genius of man and the expression of man. But what is this expression? How does this expression come about? Next slide, please. This is an expression of a culture, and for a culture to survive, so you see on the left side of your screen, you see 𝗪R𝘁𝗏𝗏 temple there, and on the right side of your screen, you see the river going through the entire landscape. And so you can't really have settlements that don't have water. But in cases where settlements do not have water, so next slide, please, there is a big difficulty. Like, for example, the Persian Qanats in Iran. So this is an amazing World Heritage site. And if you see this, this is like otherworldly. Water where there was none, right? So you see the landscape dotted with all of these holes, and all of these holes are really used for people to go down into the man-made like canals that go through kilometers and kilometers of this desert landscape to be able to bring water from aquifers all the way to communities. And it is also communities that work towards the maintenance of this entire water network. Next slide, please. So this is a network that is quite impressive. And so you see that it's really just a series of holes through the desert. And this is also testament to how man sees the need to divert water into its communities, no, for its communities to survive. Next slide, please. So this is just another view of one of the irrigated areas of that World Heritage Site, the 𝗪Ｒ𝘁𝗶𝗀. Next slide, please. But water is also used for other things, like for example, in Normandy in France, you would have water for isolation and defense. So you'd have this other World Heritage Site called 𝗪ṛ𝘁𝗶𝗀𝗀 and its bay. So that is the complete name, because a lot of people would just say, oh, let's go to 𝗪R𝘁𝗶𝗀𝗀, the World Heritage Site. No. The World Heritage Site is 𝗪R𝘁𝗶𝗀𝗀 and its bay. So next slide, please. If you look at it from the top, what is important is that it is surrounded completely by water when it's high tide, right? So this is the secret to the fences of 𝗪R𝘁𝗶𝗀𝗀. It's not very easy to penetrate because it's just surrounded by water, and people back then could just get out when the tide is low, right? And if ever an invading army would need to go in, it would need to wait for low tide, in which case they've already like been shot at with arrows and stuff, right? So it's kept its defenses using the water. So that's 𝗪R𝘁𝗶𝗀𝗀 and its bay in France. So next slide, please. But some cultures use water and harness water in a way that it can be both part of its landscape and try to see that symbiotic relationship, right, between man and nature. So this is in Mexico. This is right outside Mexico City. And what you're seeing are what they call floating gardens. So they have this series of canals, and then they have these rectangular shaped floating gardens that have always been used for agriculture since about the 13th or 14th century, when this whole area was populated. Next slide, please. So the next slide will show you a bird's eye view of this landscape, right? So you would see it, you have major canals crisscrossing it, but you would see the plots of land or the islands that comprise it, right? And these are predominantly agricultural. But on the lower left side of your screen, you already see how this development is creeping into this agricultural landscape. And it's an agricultural landscape that has existed for hundreds of years, much older than like the entire Philippines. You know? So this is a very important thing. But then you see this very thin line, right, that you have to tread between preservation and development. So in this case, there is a need to preserve this food basket of Mexico City. Next slide, please. So it is always linked to the historic center of Mexico City. In fact, When Mexico was nominating the Historic Center of Mexico City to the World Heritage List, the World Heritage Center said, wait a minute, why don't you do something else? Because we have a lot of cities already in our World Heritage List. It's overpopulated with cities from Latin America. So why don't we do something different? Why don't you connect the city to its food source, which was 𝗪𝗁𝗀 at that time? So next slide, please. Historic Center of Mexico City is this impressive ensemble of monuments that date back to the 16th century. So you see here a map from about the middle of the 1600s, and you see that it was also surrounded by water, right? So legend has it that the Aztecs, to be able to found their capital, needed to look for a sign. And the sign was, it's pretty complicated, but you can Google the Mexican flag and you're gonna see the sign there in the middle of the Mexican flag. It is an eagle perched on top of a cactus, and in its beak is a serpent. So if they didn't see those three things, then they can't have their capital. And lo and behold, in the middle of the lake was an island with a cactus plant, with an eagle perched on it, with a serpent. Amazing. I don't know if I believe it or not, but that is the story. So that's the beginnings of Mexico City. So you see it in the middle of water. Next slide, please. And you do see that it is a grid, right? It's a grid of streets. Next slide. So the grid of streets is still there. In fact, a lot of people are saying that, oops, sorry, can we go back? Sorry about that. So a lot of people are saying that this thing, grids, is really something that came from pre-colonial Mexican civilizations, simply because they had already that grid, as I showed you earlier, in the Chinampas, in 𝗪𝗁𝗀𝗀. If you remember the floating gardens, all of those were arranged in a grid. And when the Spaniards came to Mexico City, they also saw that everything was placed in a grid. So the development of Mexico City is as a grid, but as you can see here, it is a really densely packed urban environment. And where's the water? It's gone. The water is totally gone. In the hundreds of years of Mexico City's existence since 1521, after being taken over by the Spaniards, little by little, all of the water had been, reclaimed. So when you go to Mexico City today, you hardly see traces of the old lake. And you don't even see traces of the link between Mexico City and 𝗪𝗁𝗀𝗀, that food basket earlier, because all of those links used to be through canals, and the canals had been filled up, and a lot of them have become the streets of Mexico City, the boulevards of Mexico City today. So if you really think about it, this is one World Heritage Site that that holds a lot of lessons for development, right? So next slide, please. So we're going to sort of talk about heritage and development, right? Culture and development. So if you look at things like, for example, a lot of us would love to go to Venice, or people who have gone to Venice would love to go back to Venice, because it's such a beautiful place. It's a magical place. And Venice, well, I hate to say it, but Venice is also a big experiment in reclamation, because like Mexico City, it expanded and people built artificial islands. to be able to, if you see all of these palazzo in front of you on the screen along the Grand Canal, all of this were built, most of it was built on reclaimed land, on man-made islands in the Venetian lagoon. So next slide, please. So Venice is in a very important lesson in development. So this is Venice captured in panoramic view in the middle of the 1800s. And as you can see, if you can just click successively 2 or 3 times, if you can see it, it's really this huge city already by that time. That's just in the last in the middle of the 1800s. No, at this point, the importance of Venice as a trade outpost had definitely waned already. No, but all of the delights of Venice were still there. It did become this unparalleled maritime power, but by this period, by the 1850s, 1860s, people were just going to Venice to sort of suck up on culture and all of the delights that the city can offer. You know, so a lot of people would troop to Venice and find inspiration in Venice, but not a lot of people saw what was going to happen like in 100, 150 years time. Next slide, please. So you have a city that is treading this developments. Next slide, please. Venice and Mexico cities are not without their problems. This is Mexico City in 1983. There was a huge earthquake that struck the city, this month in 1983, September of 1983. There was a huge earthquake that rocked Mexico City, and everybody woke up to this site. Next slide, please. So you can see a lot of buildings had collapsed, and the city was really in flames and in ruins, right? So the city of palaces was almost completely reduced to rubble. And if you see this, this is a hotel that was a combination of like an early 20th century construction, and it also had like 1960s construction. So you would be thinking, no, but it's a very sturdy structure. But what caused all of this? What caused all of it? What caused it all was that at this point, a lot of people were living in Mexico City, and they were not regulating how people pumped out water from the ground, right? So people were just wantonly extracting water from the ground, so much that when the earthquake hit, there was, of course, liquefaction. So a lot of our engineer friends don't really like that term, liquefaction. But at the end of it all, it can cause major destruction in cities like Mexico. And you see that it also, big portions of Mexico City were also reclaimed. And to suck all of that water from underneath just put everything in jeopardy. Next slide, please. So Venice, returning to Venice, you see this really, really thick crowd. This has nothing to do with the ills of reclamation, but this has everything to do with development. No? So you see this site, and this is just amazing, because a lot of the residents of Venice have already fled the city because of all of these tourists. And this is happening also in other places, like, for example, if you know Vigan in the north, Vigan is another World Heritage City. But at the end of it, right before the pandemic, there was just too much tourism already. And it was forcing people out of their homes because everybody was just going there either for the weekend or even for a longer stay. And the prices of land and basic goods in the city have also risen so much that the locals can't afford it anymore. So this is one problem that that cities are facing. And I mean, a lot of our cities would love to have all of this development and all of like to woo everybody to come to our cities and enjoy the delights of our cities, whether old or modern. But we have to think about this really well, right? What do we want for ourselves and what do we want for generations, right, of our families to enjoy? Do we want them to enjoy the city as how we enjoy it right now? Or do you want them to enjoy something like this? I don't know how you can enjoy like legions of strangers hanging around you. Next slide, please. But Venice is also notorious for something. Oh my gosh! Oh, sorry. So this is one of the problems that Venice was facing right before the pandemic. So the huge influx of tourism has already brought in all of these mega cruise ships, right? And not only do they spoil the landscape and the entire experience of Venice, but they also create, when they move, they also create this current this current that goes underneath, and it sort of just erodes all of these artificial islands. So imagine all of these islands getting eroded in the foundations, little by little, right? So we don't know for how much more Venice will be there if it still keeps on allowing these cruise ships to produce this microwaves and currents underneath the water. So at the end of it all, you might lose something to, let's say, economic gains, right? So we better think about these things carefully. We know that we have to feed everybody around us, but we have to carefully look at the means, right? Is it right? Is it correct for our communities, for our cultural setting? And this cruise ship problem is really something so rampant that it had put Venice in the endangered list of World Heritage. I think that was 10 years ago that it was placed there. Next slide, please. But there's something that happens every year to Venice that that a lot of people don't really like, a lot of tourists. This is a thing called acqualta, high water. So every year or every 2 years, the water just rises beyond normal. And this is both sort of man-made, but also natural. So acqualta has always been there in Venice as a natural phenomenon, but the man-made part of it is similar to what Mexico had gone through, right? There had been industries around the basin of the lagoon that had been sucking out the groundwater so much that the city of Venice was already sinking. I think it had gone down about 22 or 23 centimeters if you measure it today, right? So it had gone down about 22 or 23 centimeters, and like a little less than half, 40% of that number would be attributed to that problem of industries pumping out water from underground. But thankfully, they have already put a stop to that problem. So the industries have since moved out of the basin of this lagoon. So next slide, please. But it is something that that really still haunts Venice. No, let's go to something a little bit more current. Since we're talking about World Heritage, so This is the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. The Great Barrier Reef is very, very important. Next slide, please. When it was inscribed, a lot of people back then were saying that if there was only one reef that will be put into the World Heritage list, then it should be the Great Barrier Reef. And here you have the numbers to prove it. So 348,000 square kilometers of coral, right? And you have 2,500 individual reefs, over 900 islands, 1,500 species of fish, 400 species of coral, 4,000 species of mollusks, 240 bird species. And I think what's most important is the line at the bottom. Let me explain that to you. To be put into the World Heritage, you have to at least have one of 10 criteria, right? So there are 10 criteria to become World Heritage. You at least have to hit one, right? But the cultural criteria would be from 1 up to 6. And then 7 all the way to 10 would correspond to the natural criteria. So as you see here, it hits 7, 8, 9, and 10. This is how important the Great Barrier Reef actually is, right? Next slide, please. So if you really think about it, it should already be excluded from development and excluded from like any trace of man coming in. But this is a document from around 2016, and in the middle you're seeing the reasons, right? So it's saying like first you have a serious decline in the population of the endangered species or other species of outstanding universal value. That is what World Heritage is all about, right? It's about outstanding universal value for which the property was legally established to protect, either by natural factors such as disease or by man-made factors. But then after that, you have severe deterioration of the natural beauty or scientific value of the property as by human settlement, construction of reservoirs, which flood important parts of the property, industrial and agricultural development, including use of pesticides and fertilizers, major public works, mining, pollution, logging, firewood collection, etc. So it's getting worse and worse. And then after that, you have human encroachment on boundaries, right? So it just gets worse and worse and worse. And in the last World Heritage session, there was already a clamor to put this property, the Great Barrier Reef, into the list of World Heritage in danger. So this document is just telling the World Heritage Committee, please put it already in the list of World Heritage in danger, so that the government of Australia will really be alarmed and try to do all the means to take it out of that list of World Heritage in danger, right? Next slide, please. So here you just have a photo of one of the underwater areas. But if you just read through it, you're going to see a lot of things that don't really blend in well with such sites, right? Industrial ports, and then export of coal, and then extraction, right? So it's not very good. It is a very telling sign that the outstanding universal value for which this fantastic property was inscribed into the World Heritage List is slowly disappearing. It's really slowly disappearing. But the worst part of this is you're not just taking the Great Barrier Reef as one property, right? It's something that is connected to other areas, right? So if the Great Barrier Reef is allowed to deteriorate, then it is certain that other areas in seas and oceans around the world will really deteriorate with it, right? Next slide, please. I think that's the beauty of the concept of World Heritage. Beauty of it is really saying that, you know, one country doesn't have the monopoly of its heritage. And like, for example, all of these um, reef systems that are inscribed into the World Heritage List, these should not enjoy boundaries, right? These should not have boundaries because the connection through water is just so expansive. We're looking at the Belize Barrier Reef Reserve System. So this is another one of those really fantastic natural properties that are in the World Heritage List. And it's not just fantastic from above, like, for example, this landscape that you're seeing, but it's also beautiful from underneath. Next slide, please. But the reason why I wanted to include this site is because it was added to the list of World Heritage in danger in 2009. So you have threats of irreversible damage from harmful coastal construction and oil exploration, something similar to what the World Heritage, what the Great Barrier Reef is experiencing or has been experiencing for the past decade or two. Next slide, please. So you have this amazing underwater scenery. So next slide. There's a little delay. There you go. So here it says in 2017, it's amazing. The country said no more oil explorations, right? So it had legislated a ban on oil explorations. Imagine a country, a very small country like Belize, could grow enormously wealthy from extracting oil. But here it says, no, we're going to put a ban on that, right? Because this reef system is much more important than all of the money that we're going to make from oil extraction. And most probably, they're not going to be the ones doing the oil extraction anyway. It's going to be people from other countries who would also benefit from it. So Belize is really just one of the three countries in the world with such laws. Next slide, please. So it makes it really amazing that this country can think about nature that way and how nature can also enjoy the same rights as people. So Belizeans stood up to protect their reef. So they showed it like locally, and they also launched campaigns internationally. And they proved to the world that it would be much better for you to develop management systems and to reverse all of this, all of the effects of development to the loss of this natural environment. So it's really just creating that sustainable future for everyone, right? Next slide, please. So this is such a huge source of inspiration for a lot of places. And well, maybe we can go back to Venice. I like this quote. It comes from a CNN reportage on Venice in 2019. So it says that the mere survival of Venice in 2019 is a testament to the determination, ingenuity, collaboration, and ferocity of humans seeking to eke out a life in hostile environments. What is it actually saying? It's actually just asking you, why did you go there in the first place? Right? I mean, why did you have to build there? Why did you have to settle there? But there is that inimitable human spirit, but sometimes it's really just as it says, ferocious. It just gobbles everything. So there is that part of us that can just see nature as a commodity, right? And not see the sustainability of living with nature, of that symbiotic relationship. So I think that is something that is very important for us to see in these. I think there were 4 case studies that were presented this evening. So it's really looking at how man and nature could live symbiotically. Because at the end of the day, even if we say that we're really developing, what is all of it if we lose the things that actually give us life? So if we lose water, if we lose air, right? Then where are we? If we lose our food sources, where are we? What are we going to do? Right? So these cities can show us how we can act, right? They're not just pretty places to look at. They are places that can serve as inspirations for us to see beyond where we are today and to plan a better future for the next generations to come. Next slide, please. So the 1972 convention is only as good as local and national laws that protect the properties. The 1972 convention is the World Heritage Convention, right? So we're all thinking that, oh, let's get it into the World Heritage list. But at the end of it all, the World Heritage Committee in Paris is just going to take a look at how you protect your properties on a local level, right? So how does the city protect it? How does the province protect it? How does the nation protect it? And then when it sees that, okay, everything is in order, then they will say, okay, maybe you can be World Heritage, right? So I think this just says that the battle is never over, right? Let's say for people out there who don't believe in reclamation, right, in Dumaguete, and if the battle is won, right, and there is no reclamation, then you have to make sure that it will never happen. It will not happen in your lifetime. It will not happen in anybody's lifetime, right? For like generations and generations to come. So you have to look at how to legally also protect it, right? Maybe in summing all of this up, I'd like for you to take a look at the rights of nature. It's a big global movement that had its origins in Latin America. So look it up. I think there's a YouTube video on the rights of nature. Next slide, please. So man and nature can exist symbiotically. Next slide. There you go. So effective legislation and public participation. So all of this, all of what you're doing, it's fantastic. It's really fantastic. I can say that there has never been such support, right, for the conservation, not just of cultural properties, but natural properties outside of the major cities, right? This is happening in Dumaguete. Everybody sees that. Everybody knows Dumaguete as this very idyllic city, and all of a sudden it is thrust into public view with this issue. And I think it's wonderful. I really think it's wonderful that you are saying, wait a minute, let's rethink this. Maybe it's not a good thing, right? Um, next slide, please. Have I reached the end of my discussion? Oh, there you go. So I think this ends it for me tonight. And thank you for having me as your dinner companion tonight. I see I have over 100 dinner companions, and yeah, I can entertain questions after this. Thank you.
Thank you for that great talk, Nico. It's interesting really looking at how man and nature can live symbiotically, and how the battle is really never over, especially when it's for our future, our children's future, and the children of our children's future. At this point, we are now entertaining questions for our speaker. If there are any, you may leave them at the Q&A box or at the comment section of our Facebook Live.
Yeah, there's a nice question here. Are there cases around the world where development occurred, people's lives improved, and yet the culture or heritage was still preserved for the most part? If yes, how were they able to achieve this? Oh, wow. Okay, so to Nadia was the one who asked that question. Okay, apparently you weren't in that heritage forum hosted by UST some weeks ago. There was a presentation from the city of Vigan. It was the mayor who spoke about it. And while recognizing that they had their problems arising from things such as tourism, massive tourism, and also like development creeping into the fabric of their cultural heritage, it was dealing with this in a different way. What she said is something so important that hopefully more cities will be infected by this I could say trend, right? And what she said was they are going more and more into culture-based governance, right? So what she is saying is everything that they do will be put up against what is important to them as Vigueños, no? So it is put up against their identity. So all of these, for example, if you have a project, right? If somebody says, okay, let's build a 50-story building in the middle of Vigan, the city council will deliberate on it, and it will look at how it will affect the identity of the people of Vigan, right? So it has already conducted a cultural mapping exercise. Actually, it has done several cultural mapping exercises in the course of like 20 years. But it's never really enough. You have to validate all of the data. But what's coming out really is this fantastic set of data that is telling them, oh, okay, this is really important for us. Take, for example, in the area of education. What they did with the data that came out of the cultural mapping was to integrate it into the curriculum already of the local schools. For example, if you're going to teach ratio and proportion in mathematics, right? If you're going to teach ratio and proportion, then in Vigan, they would teach it by way of cooking, right? So they would say, how much of this ingredient or how much of that ingredient will I use to make this this dish, 𝗪𝗁𝗀 or something, right? So how much of this certain vegetable do I put, and so on and so forth. And then they would say, okay, that's how you see how a whole is cut up into parts. So it's a wonderful and very practical means of explaining it to a child, right? And they explain things by way of what they know as veganos, which is fantastic. So everybody grows up having this really solid this solid identity. Everybody knows who they are, right? And when you know who you are, you know what exactly it is that you are protecting. Because when something comes in and you see that, oh, wait a minute, this thing is potentially going to hurt who I am, then we ward it off, right? So it's really in looking at all of the elements that make you, right, yourself. So vegan has done that for in the past like 15, 16 years, and it's been quite successful. So I guess that's the answer to that question. That yeah, you can have development. Vegan is also capitalizing on its World Heritage status through tourism, but it also sees that, wait a minute, we have to regulate things already. There's another question. If the city or LGU will not take participation in
So I
making
guess
Dumaguete City
this
or the
question is
Dumaguete Coast.
slightly related to the other question, that if the city would not take participation in making Dumaguete City or the Dumaguete coastline a World Heritage Site, would it still be possible to consider Dumaguete or its coastal areas to be a World Heritage Site? So I guess this is asking more of like possible procedures or possible applicants of who can determine what is a World Heritage Site or who can apply for one.
Right. Yeah, that's a very interesting question, attorney, and I'll be glad to answer it. Although really my specialization is cultural. This is a natural site, right? As I said earlier, for the natural sites, you have to hit one or more criteria, right? From 7, 8, 9, and 10. So there are 4 criteria right there. And there's also this thing called, I said it earlier, outstanding universal value. So you have to prove its value globally, right? So for World Heritage, it also checks, is this site valuable only to a specific group of people, right? Is it valuable to only one city or only one province? Or is it valuable only to one nation, right? Or is it valuable only to a region, right? The ASEAN region, to say something, right? If it is, then it is not of outstanding universal value, because you have to really prove that this is something that is value, right? So how do you prove that? In a lot of ways, really, in a lot of ways. So if for example, you're looking at the criterion that says that it has this high amount of biodiversity and endemic species and all of that, then you have to make that inventory and tell the world that, look, we have all of these species of fish and coral and whatnot that don't exist in other parts of the world, or something like that, right? Or we have this amazing area that I don't know, is proven to be like in the intersection, right, of major sites or things. I don't know. I'm really not into. I'm really not a specialist in natural heritage, but it's factors like that, and then you pit it against all other sites that are already in the World Heritage List, and that's when you see that, oh, okay, my site is getting higher and higher and higher, right? It's climbing higher and higher and higher. And when you say that, oh, wow, it is, it can't be compared to a lot of other sites because it's so unique, right? So you have to find that uniqueness in your site also. So, but again, okay, remember I said earlier, it's not a beauty pageant. It is not just because it's beautiful or it has all of this, all of these species of marine life and whatnot. It's not just that. It's not just the numbers. It's how you protect it, right? If the World Heritage Committee and Center see that, okay, even if you have this fantastic property, you don't have the laws protecting it, right? You don't have the backing locally from your city, from your province, and you're not even declared nationally, right? At least in this case, you're a marine protected area, right? But it has to see clearly how all of the management protocols look like, right? Because the convention is not just, it's not just called the Convention on World Heritage. It is the convention to protect the world's heritage. So protection is a huge part of it. So nowadays, in the past like 10 or 20 years, it had been increasingly difficult to get sites into the World Heritage List because the committee and the World Heritage Center are looking more and more into how countries manage their sites. So it's also in the management that you score points, so to speak, if that's the way we want to look at it. So I hope I did answer your question.
Yeah, so I think related to that, you mentioned earlier that vegan is a heritage site in the Philippines. Would you know if that's the only site that we have, or do we have other heritage sites here in the Philippines? This is another question from an anonymous attendee.
Oh my, yeah, yeah. Okay. So we have a couple of World Heritage sites. We have 4 churches that are considered World Heritage sites. These are San Agustin in Manila, Quiapo in Iloilo, Pauay in Ilocos Norte, and Santa Maria in Ilocos Sur. But the World Heritage list only recognizes those 4 as one property. So it's called the Baroque Churches of the Philippines. No? So that's one property. The next property, cultural, that you have is the city of Vigan, right? So that's also cultural. We have one that was sort of like in the debate because nobody really knew if it was a natural site or a cultural site or both, right? So it's during that time that the World Heritage Center and Committee decided, okay, we'll create another dimension, which is cultural landscapes, right? The rice terraces of the Ifugao rice terraces is also considered as World Heritage Site, and this is comprised of 5 major areas in the highlands of Ifugao. No, so those are 3 already, and then for natural sites, you have the underground river in Puerto Princesa, and then you have Tubataha, the reefs in Tubataha, and the latest one that we got was Mount Hamigitan in Davao Oriental. So we actually have 6 properties into the list of World Heritage. It's a different discussion to take a look at how all of these are managed. So let's not go there.
Yeah. I guess it's also a follow-up question to, I guess, the factors in determining a World Heritage Site. One of the questions is, would being the center of the Coral Triangle be enough to be of global importance? So I guess it's just asking whether this would be enough to hit one of the factors to be considered World Heritage Site.
Right, right. So in that case, you know, it's a very interesting question. So if you're framing it within the coral triangle, then you'd have to also take a look at which sites within the coral triangle are already in the list, right? And how your site relates to these sites, these other sites, right? So it's constantly pitting it against other sites, right? Just to see if my site how will my site fare against other sites within the coral triangle. So it's not just how it relates, but how also like you have this very important thing called integrity. In cultural sites, it's authenticity and integrity, but for natural sites, it's really just the integrity of the site, right? So how well conserved is your site? That's basically it. And how does it if you're nominating it, let's say for criterion 7, how will it suffice criterion 7, right? So you'll have to explain all of that. But to say that it's in the middle of the coral triangle, you'll have to explain so much more, right? Than that. What does it mean to be in the middle of the coral triangle? How important is this area to the rest of the coral triangle? So you'll also have to take a look at different angles in it. And there's also another thing, you'll have to take a look at the gaps, right? Because when you look at the reports of the World Heritage Center, they will also say that, oh, wait a minute, we have gaps in the World Heritage list, right? So for example, for cultural sites before, they said, we have too many colonial cities. That's what they told Mexico City, right? If you remember what I said earlier, they told Mexico City, no, but we're overpopulated with colonial cities. Therefore, you have to look at another angle, right? You have to take a look at how you can have an edge, right, against other possible candidates also within your cluster. So it's also looking into that, the list of gaps and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's really a lot of research. It's all of the research. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I guess what we've been really getting so far is that it's really how well preserved your area is, if there's been governance protecting the area. And one of the questions related to that is you have been mentioning the importance of valuing what we have and what we don't to lose to guide us in planning for development. So valuing the environment, this is a question from a biologist, by the way. Valuing the environment seems more straightforward than our future. So how can one give special figures to an area's culture and history so that people will realize how valuable a place is?
Okay, that's a very complex question.
Okay.
I'll really try my best to answer that. But can I just share with you that when we finished that forum a couple of weeks ago, hosted by UST, we were already looking at. Remember how I showed you in one slide what a cultural landscape is, right? So this is how man would sort of put his own mark, leave his own mark, right? But still keep that symbiotic relationship with nature, right? So let's take, for example, what's a cultural landscape? The rice terraces. The rice terraces is a fantastic example of a cultural landscape, because if they don't take care of the muyong, the forests on top, right, of the mountains, then they will not have a source of water to irrigate the terraces. So if they let these muyong or communal forests deteriorate, then everything below it will collapse. No? So, but if you look at the landscape, you're wondering, oh my gosh, this is something that is man-made, but it can't exist without nature. That's the beauty of it. So when we were looking at the case of Dumaguete, there is a clear relationship between the city and the sea, right? So first off, I don't think you will have a Dumaguete if the sea was not right in front of it, because a lot of, as we were seeing, a lot of these sites are really located where water is. No, if they're not rivers, they can be they could be coastal areas. So you also have to see that relationship. But in this case, maybe it's the other way around. It's not a cultural landscape. It's not a landscape. It's a seascape, right? It is how your relationship with the sea had fashioned, how it fashioned everything in Dumaguete, including maybe language, right? What terms do you use that from like sailing terms, right? Or fishing terms, or things that, or things specific to the cultural expression of Dumaguete that have to do with the sea. When you take a look at all of these, then you will realize that, oh wow, there's more than like 10 things about us that link us to the sea culturally, right? So if we do not value the sea in front of us, then we will also sort of be a spectator to how our cultural identity slowly will get eroded, right? Because there's no more connection. I don't know if that answered it, but it's something a little bit more complex, that relationship between culture and nature. And it's complex and it's simple, right? I think we just have to get what we need. Yun lang naman yata. So if you just get what you need, then you're on the right path, right?
Yeah. Well, I think also, I mean, we know that your expertise is in conservation of built heritage, but maybe you could also share a little bit of your experience. We have a question here on, I think it basically asks what actions have been done for people wanting to conserve a certain place. So it goes like this. What can we do and how can we create conversations to convince people of the importance of sustaining or even conserving this resource?
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Maybe we can take it from the point of view of how Mount Hamikitan was nominated. I remember back then that when the provincial of Davao Oriental was sort of formulating everything, formulating the entire nomination dossier, it was necessary for us, because I was working with the UNESCO office here in Manila. It was necessary for us to accompany a representative from the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, IUCN, who came here to assess Mount Hamikitan. So we were a rather big group that went through. We traversed Mount Hamikitan in about 3 days, taking a look at everything, making an inventory of everything. We had a wonderful professor from Bukidnon who joined us with his students. We were also joined by representatives from the municipalities that surround Mount Hamikitan. And all of us had to climb the mountain. And they had this group called the Bantay Gubat. And Bantay Gubat, who was explaining to us everything, everything that we were seeing. So they would know up to the scientific names of the plant species that we were looking at, or the animal species that we were looking at. It was amazing. And for a layman to be able to experience that is something else, right? It's really telling you that, wait a minute, we're really serious in this protection, no? So we engage as much as much normal people, right, on the ground as we can, no? So the Bantay Gubat was not really a formal group at one point in time, but they were constituted to be like this, the guardians of Mount Hamiguitan at one point. And Mount Hamiguitan was also one of the more popular places for people to go hiking back then. But towards the nomination or way into the nomination period, the local government just said, wait a minute, we think we have to regulate it already, right? So it sent a very big message to everybody. No, I think we have to rethink, this tourism aspect. Yes, you are also exploring nature, but not in the way that you should, right? What's that motto? There is a motto that leave nothing but footsteps or something like that. Take nothing but I don't know, photos or something. Yeah, memories, right? So they kept on repeating and repeating that the entire time, and they were saying that because they kept on narrating the last big group that went there. There were like 150 people all in one group, and it just created this huge huge amount of sort of like devastation wherever they went. And slowly they thought, wait a minute, we have to create a World Heritage Site that can educate people in the value of preserving nature. So now if you go to Hamiguitan, it's basically closed. No, it's only open to for scientific research. But around the mountain, you'd have several places, museums, interpretation centers. You'd have these dotting the circumference of the mountain, and this is where people can actually learn about Mount Hamiguitan. But whilst learning about Mount Hamiguitan, you are also learning about how important it is to preserve your natural heritage. So I think it is a big thing, the diffusion, of information, not only for natural, but for all types of heritage. So yeah, there is something there also. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, maybe a little bit in a way, in that you showed that for another site, this is what they did. But I think like the question more asked a little bit more of the aspect for something like the Dumaguete Seascape or the Dumaguete coastline. Would you know off the top of your head of what people can do to create conversations, or like to do something similar to what people did for Mount Hamiguitan, but I guess this time not applicable to the mountains, but to the sea?
Right. It would be very interesting if you would embark on that mapping, exercise. I'm sure that Silliman has all of the data already for the marine life, right? But what we don't know is, why do we have to protect the marine life? Yun yung question, basically, ba? So the question on everybody's heads is, why do I have to protect this anyway? Why can't I dump like so many millions of tons of sand and just create land? That's what you have to justify, diba? So if you want to justify it, you have to answer the question, why is it important to me? That's the basic question. And I guess that is the main point of all of these fora and lectures that we are having. It's not just telling everybody that, yes, the marine life is this and that, right? Extolling everything. It's not just saying that, but it's saying, why do I have to protect it? Why is the burden on me? Diba? So to be able to answer that, you will have to see, what is my connection to this body of water anyway? Diba? So that's what you have to, that's what you have to look at. Diba? Because we're all saying no to reclamation and whatnot, but why? Diba? Why don't I like it? Biodiversity there, marine biodiversity. Okay, why is it important for me? It feeds me because the fisherman will go there and fish, right? Okay, that's just one segment of society. Okay, there are people who go there and dive. Diba? Hey, those are two things, but what else? What else? Dumaguete has been there since, I don't know when when the city was founded. You've enjoyed, I'm sure, more than 100 years of romance with the sea. You have this fantastic boulevard that is the envy of so many cities in the Philippines. So why is this? Why did it happen like that? Diba? So that's what you have to launch into. So that is that will answer the question probably of why I have to protect what's in front of me. What is my relationship with this expanse of water?
So make it more personal to the person who is receiving the message, right? So we have another question regarding knowledge or lessons that we can glean from other places. So the question is, people here are being wooed into believing that we can be another Singapore or Hong Kong. You mentioned in your talk to learn from other countries. What are lessons that we can glean from Hong Kong and Singapore, or maybe even other countries, that would encourage those who get enthralled by the promises of the smart city to think again and think deeply?
Well, right now I love those two cities actually. So if you're asking me what things we can learn from them, we can learn so much from them, right? We can learn from Singapore, like how does Singapore manage its water resources, because it doesn't have its own water resources. So like for potable water and all of that. So how does it do it, right? So we can learn that from them. Or how is it managing, for example, waste, right? So it's a small compact city, but with so much waste. How is it managing that? We're seeing this in many cities, not just Singapore, not just Hong Kong. You see it also in other cities like Tokyo, older ones, Tokyo or Seoul in South Korea. You have so much to learn from all of these cities, but they always say, diba, learn from our mistakes. Learn from our mistakes. So it's good to see what their mistakes also are, diba? But sometimes kasi a city is too young to see na kung if something already went wrong. It's not like, for example, what I showed you earlier, diba? That these are cities that have existed from between 1,000 years to 500 years. Parang ganon. And the lessons learned are so obvious. But for newer cities like Singapore, it's so easy to fall in love with something, with that idea, diba? So easy to fall in love with the idea that, oh wow, it's a brand new city, and parang it's so shiny, it's so, diba? It's so well lit, it's so clean, immaculate, and all of that. How does it do that, diba? How does it do that? But maybe we'll also think na parang culturally, are we like that? Diba? Are we brought up to be like Singapore, or maybe you're trying to put yourself you're trying to fit yourself into something that you are not, no? And maybe that's where the concept of like a generic smart city may actually fail, no? Like for example, I'll give you an example. Here in Manila, there is there's this new area, BGC. So Bonifacio Global City, and that's one of the pegs for the smart city of Dumaguete also, diba? There's Bonifacio Global City, but then there is Manila, like old Manila, no? Where do people go in the weekends? People would rather go to old Manila. People are exploring old Manila. Yes, people will eat in the restaurant in Bonifacio Global City, but you know that they will always look for something that has roots, that has history, diba? That tells you of who you are, diba? As maybe as somebody from Manila, or maybe a Filipino, or something like that. Something that you take a look at and say that, oh wow, this has been here for so long already, diba? So it is also part of me. Yun eh. So parang it's that good balance of like of having something to look back at, diba? In order to go forward. That's something that maybe Singapore is also trying to do, diba? So in the area of cultural heritage, Singapore is also trying its best to preserve the vestiges of its past. No, so if you go to the Urban Regulatory Authority of Singapore, it's fantastic because you have all of these manuals dealing with the preservation of its buildings, of its old buildings, and it's categorized. Now, for example, you have all of these books on shop houses lang, diba? Anatomy of a shop house, what makes a shop house important, why is it, diba? Why should we preserve it, and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, there are all of these rules and regulations, diba? Na what you can do, what you cannot do. So people just go there and take a look at it and say, okay, black and white. It's so easy to understand, diba? So maybe we can learn Singapore in that sense, but also it's not a very purist way of looking at it, because if you go to Singapore and you enter a shop house, a couple of shop houses, there is a shop house that would look so traditional, diba? Top to bottom, super traditional. But then there are shop houses now when you enter, it's a totally different world. It's super ultra modern. No, it doesn't look like anything from the outside. So this is already telling you that, wait, this is how Singapore does it. Diba? This is us. We have roots in the past, but we keep our gaze firmly towards toward the future, towards progress and all of that. No, but we still will make sure that our past is protected. Something like that. So we can learn a lot of things from places like these. Hong Kong may be not so great on the cultural preservation aspect, such as Singapore. As I said, Singapore is much diba? Much younger. So parang nakita na rin ng Singapore, okay, wait a minute, Hong Kong didn't do that quite well, diba? So we'll do it better, diba? So it's just benchmarking, diba? It's looking at your neighbors, what they're doing good, and taking that, enhancing it, and looking at what they're not doing na maganda, diba? And then taking the lessons from that, so to speak.
Yeah. So actually, someone also asked a question related to the old and the new, and really looking at how it addresses the conservation and preservation aspect of this. So from that, there's also a question on, I guess, other than the World Heritage Convention, do you know of any other laws regarding other heritage areas that we can follow or take inspiration from, so our legislators can create laws to protect our natural resources as well? I think where this is coming from is that recently we've, the provincial board of the province of Negros Oriental has actually passed a resolution regarding the marine protected areas around the province. So maybe a similar question, this is a similar take on that question, whether there are other laws that we can draw inspiration from when it comes to heritage areas other than the convention itself.
Oh, okay. Sorry, let me get this straight. The convention is not a law, right? The laws, as I was saying earlier, the laws are within the boundaries, no, of your jurisdiction. Like, for example, for Mount Hamiguitan, it's Philippine laws. It's only Philippine laws that apply to its protection. Now, the way World Heritage works is that it has its operational guidelines, and the operational guidelines would tell you how you can get something into the list of World Heritage, no? And how something will enter into the endangered list, and how something can be taken out of the list of World Heritage. No, and so far there have only been 3 properties that have been taken out. But it's not a law. A lot of people think kasi it's a law. Ako rin dati, akala ko law siya. But it's just something that is recommendatory. But more than just being recommendatory kasi, the Philippines signed the convention. So it is a state party to the convention. So having signed it, then you are also saying that I am sort of abiding by the principles of this convention. Parang ganun siya. So a lot of there have also been other such documents, no? Whether for the protection of cultural heritage or the protection of natural heritage. So a whole list of those documents for natural heritage you can find in the webpage of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, or IUCN. If you look through their page, you can see the conventions and the charters, diba? Those are not laws. Those are not laws. But countries would sign, diba? And say that we believe in what these conventions are saying, or in what these charters are saying. Charter naman is different. So you may have, for example, for us in cultural heritage, we have a couple of charters. We have the Athens Charter, we have the Venice Charter, we have the 𝗪ṛ𝘁𝗲 Charter from Australia. Those are also not laws, diba? But when you say kasi that, okay, I subscribe by what the charter says, then it means that I'm taking the principles of these charters and I'm putting it into practice. No? It also means that a country can benefit from these conventions, these charters, and let it influence its legislation. Diba? So you have a lot of legislation here that have been also inspired by all of these other all of these charters and all of these conventions. so if you can look through, for example, the laws that that pertain to um, let's just say the RA 10066, which is the cultural the law for cultural preservation. Diba? Yeah, so it's the Heritage Act. You'll see that in the Heritage Act, there are things that were culled from charters. Like, for example, the concept of a conservation management plan is actually something that is taken from the 𝗪𝘁𝗲 Charter of Australia. It doesn't exist in any other charter. So you know that the people who crafted this law were also looking at other, they were benchmarking. No, they were also benchmarking. So it's good to see your local laws. You can do research on laws for the protection of natural heritage, like the NIPAS law and everything else that that has to do with the preservation of the environment. And you can also take a look at the laws for cultural heritage, but see it also against the bigger picture, the global picture, no? And you will see, again, diba? What is important is not the knowledge of all of these foreign conventions and charters, but how you take it and contextualize it into your own, into this context, no? The Philippine context, the context of Dumaguete or of Negros, diba? There are things that are particular to you, diba, from Dumaguete that we don't really have, like here in Manila, or vice versa, diba? So when we think of legislation, local legislation might come out pretty different, diba? So it's also good to take inspiration. No, it's very good to take inspiration, but make sure to contextualize it.
Okay. So I guess that leads us to our last question on contextualizing it. It's more of a hypothetical, it's a more of a private opinion. If you were asked as an advisor to this project for the 174 reclamation, what would be the factors that you would look at as a contractor, as a consultant, on whether or not it should push through, or what are the things that you should be looking at?
Oh my.
You don't have to, you don't have you don't have to say yes or no, but baka like maybe framed in the context of cultural preservation, or in that manner, like things or factors that you would look for if you were brought on as a consultant to the project, or kasi di ko naman gusto na put on the spot ka na yes or no, di ba? But I guess yun lang, like what are the factors that you would look at, maybe in line with your expertise?
Yeah, no, me lang kasi, attorney, it's really, it's not just looking at the project and extolling its benefits, di ba? Parang, of course, every project has its benefits, but hate to say it, but it's really what the public thinks. Because at the end of the day, administrations come and go. But the mark that they leave can be so immense, no, that the public will bear the burden of all of it. Diba? So what you do, what an administration does today has such a big repercussion to the future of a community. No? Pero, well, they were the elected people. Diba? So the public also elected them. Well, that's one, public consultation. No? That's very, very important. You know, even in the NCCA, we've really realized that public consultation should be like at the core whenever you are reviewing a project proposal. No, so it's doing a lot of those public consultations. It's in doing those that you see the pros and cons to the people that you are serving. diba? Because this is a public project, supposedly, diba? So, you know, that alone, to create the framework for public consultation can already be so complex. That is a project in itself, diba? How do you conduct your public consultation anyway, diba? So that I think is one huge, huge element, no, that that has to be looked into, no, public opinion on the project. Of course, yun kanina, di ba? I was telling you about like mapping, because sometimes you're just seeing it black and white. Eh. I'm dealing with the sea, so I just look into the sea. Diba? I'm dealing with the water in front of me, so I'm just looking at the effect on the water in front of me. But what about the effect on the community? Diba? So yun yung hindi mo nakita. So that's where the mapping comes in. That's where the mapping really comes in. So if you really look at it, it's conducting not only your environmental impact analysis, but also your heritage impact analysis. Diba? Because there is a big impact on the heritage of people. Diba? If you dump all of that land into the sea. So what happens then to the cultural heritage of people? What happens to people's identities? No, when one day we all wake up and no more view from my beautiful boardwalk. Diba? So where do I go? Diba? Is there another boardwalk? Diba? So if you created another boardwalk, then what happens to this boardwalk? Wala na. Diba? So that's another thing that you have to see. No, it's the impact to heritage. No, and I don't know. Maybe it's really just creating a bigger plan for the entire for the coast, no, and for everything along the coast. Kasi parang does this form part of a preconceived plan? Diba? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it just came out of nowhere. Diba? What is it linked to? Is it linked to something national? Diba? Is it linked to a development plan for the province? So those are the things that I'll probably look into to be able to qualify that, oh yes, we do need this or we don't need this. But because at the end of the day, parang I really believe in master planning kasi and if you do a very good and thoroughly researched master plan and you've seen all of the aspects of what you're dealing with, then all of these things are just part of a master plan, eh. Diba? But sometimes kasi parang biglang we wake up and there's a plan. Where did it come from? Yung ganon. So you start to question, wait a minute. Saan ba talaga galing yung plan? Diba? Who's the author of this plan? It wasn't, nobody talked about it before. So things like that. Yun lang siguro yung mga hanapin ko. Like an heritage impact assessment and an environmental impact assessment, master plans and such. No? Just to say a few things.
Okay, so thank you, Miko. That's actually all for our
No
questions
problem.
for today. We've actually touched on so many different aspects. We have international conventions to making the approach more personal. And I guess at this point, do you have any last words or closing remarks that you want to share with our viewers?
Gosh, I think I've talked too much,
No.
attorney.
Of course,
Yeah,
man. No,
I think I
We,
bored you all with everything that I could say.
no,
But
I mean, I learned a
yeah,
lot
you know,
personally.
I think at the end of the day, we really define the course of our histories. So I really do commend everybody, um, not just the ones who are against it, but the ones who are really expressing their what do you call this, their support for it. And I hope that whatever happens, diba, it doesn't really divide your city. It actually brings all of you much more together, diba, in seeing things, because um, wala, there's no looking back from this. May pros, may pro and may anti, 'di ba? So I think really it's looking at what is best for Dumaguete, no? And for people from other cities who are listening in, it's really looking at what is best for your cities, 'di ba? And I guess what is best for your cities is really just to treat them as communities, 'di ba? And I think that's what I love about Dumaguete. Whenever I visit, I always have a friend in Dumaguete who would take me around, 'di ba? And there's always somebody who would want to invite you to lunch or dinner or whatnot. It's that, 'di ba? It's a lot of times when we transform into something bigger, we lose so much of that. So maybe it's time to ask ourselves, no, do I want to take that path? Do I want to take it on? And if the answer is no, then no sana. Diba? I'm really just hoping and praying for like the best for Dumaguete. I myself don't want to say that I am pro or against, no, but given my conservation background, of course, it always veers towards what is best for your culture and what is best for your environment. And I think at this point, it's obvious naman, di ba? So I guess I guess that's it.
Thank you, Miko, for tonight's talk. And I think even more Dumagueteños will willingly invite you for lunch or dinner after your very enlightening talk tonight. On behalf of the Dumaguete City Host Lions Club and Rotary Club of Dumaguete South, thank you for joining us. Thank you also to all our viewers on Zoom and FB Live. So please stay tuned for our next event. We have talks every Tuesdays and Thursdays, and our next event is on Thursday, September 9, 2021, with Engineer 𝗪R𝘁𝗿𝗀𝗪 on refuting the 10-point presentation of 𝗪R𝘁𝗲𝗀𝗀 Dumaguete. Same time, still 7:30 to 9 p.m. If you have any questions or you wish to be updated of other upcoming events, kindly like our FB page, the Learning Event Series. We also have other upcoming events on September 9, 2021, which is the September 14, 2021, which is next Tuesday, still at 7:30 to 9 p.m. on growing the Philippine blue economy, which are policy changes and opportunities, with the speaker, Dr. Ronald U. Mendoza, the professor and dean of the Ateneo School of Government. Next Thursday, September 16, 2021, we will have the 13th Learning Event Series on the coastal integrity and climate change with speaker Dr. Fernando P. Siringan, a professor of the UP Marine Science Institute and NAS academician. On September 21, Tuesday, 7:30 to 9 p.m., we will have another event series on land use and urban planning with our speaker, architect Paulo G. Alcorazan from PGAA Creative Design. On September 23, 2021, from 7:30 to 9 p.m., we will have wider implications of dredging and island building with speaker Dr. Jorge Emanuel, an adjunct professor of our very own Silliman University. On September 28, 2021, Still it is 7:30 to 9 p.m. We will have a learning event series on the coastal evaluation of marine ecosystems with our speaker of Environmental Science and Management, UPLB. So all these Zoom recordings will actually be uploaded on the Learning Event Series YouTube channel if you missed it or you were not able to tune in live. And if you have any advanced questions for any of our upcoming event series, just send a message to our FB page. So we hope to continue to see you for the rest of the events, and thank you for tuning with us tonight. Good night.